I've made a lot of corned beef in my lifetime. Some have been wonderful, some have been complete fails. But when I tried the sous vide method for cooking a corned beef, I was blown away. It is so incredibly easy and you get consistent, delicious results each and every time. Welcome to the Salted Pepper, where we cook for real life using real food and we keep it real simple. Today's recipe is extremely simple. It is sous vide corned beef. You only need really one ingredient, the corned beef, but it also usually comes with a little spice packet, and that's what I'm going to use today. Or you can substitute any type of spice blend that you like on your corned beef. It would be perfectly fine. All right, so I promise you it's easy, but it's not quick. This is a very tough cut of meat, and if you're not familiar with what corned beef is, it is a beef brisket that has been cured in seasonings and salt. And it's a tough brisket, if you're familiar with that, is a tough cut of meat. So this takes a really long time, like over 24 hours at the temperature that I sous vide at anyway. And I'm going to go over the variations in the video so that you can determine which temperature and timing you want to do, because I've done a lot of testing on sous vide corned beef and came up with the perfect temperature and time for me based on the way that I like to eat my corned beef, which is sliceable but very tender. I don't like mine falling apart. However, if you like yours falling apart, no worries. I'm going to tell you how to do that in this video as well. And in my written post, which will be a recipe post on my website, I will go over all the different temperatures and timings so that you can get your corned beef cooked perfectly without having to do all the testing like I did. All right, so we've got our corned beef. Now, the first thing I do is I rinse it under cold water. I don't always do that if I'm using different cooking methods. I know some people do just to kind of remove the salt. I don't. Like if I'm pressure cooking, sometimes I'll just throw it in with the liquid and start pressure cooking. But with sous vide, it's such a long cook time that I find that seasonings and brines and things like that really penetrate the meat even more and can be overwhelming at times. So I like to rinse it all off. Now don't worry, the meat's still really flavorful. It's been brining for a really long time before it's considered corned beef. I think it's at least 10 days or 2 weeks or something like that. So the flavor's already there, but we just wash off that extra salt so that your meat does not become over salty during the sous vide period. Then what I do is take the little packet that comes with it. And if yours doesn't, I can tell you what's in the little packet just by looking at it. There's some mustard seed. It looks like a little bit of crumbled bay leaves, maybe a little red pepper flakes, coriander seed, black peppercorns usually, but I'm not even seeing any in here. Usually there's black peppercorns, or at least I always put some in mine. There might be a few other little things in there, but basically that would be all you would need if you didn't have the packet. But I'm just going to use this. Makes it really easy. So just cut it off. Now you want to apply the seasoning to the fat cap, okay? Obviously you could do it on the meat itself, but I like to do it on the fat cap. It gave a really nice flavor without being overwhelming. And then at the end of sous vide, I like to air fry or sear the fat cap to get the fat crispy and rendered. So I like to just have the seasonings on that side. So we're just gonna sprinkle this over here and rub it in, pat it in, whatever you want. And believe it or not, it does stay on the meat during the entire sous vide process, which is awesome. All right, that's perfect. Now, before I get into bagging it up and placing it in the water bath, it occurred to me, maybe you're looking at all this and saying, what in the world is sous vide? And what is she doing? Because it does look a little funny, I guess, if you're unfamiliar with the process of sous vide cooking. So let me briefly explain what it is, because it's really simple. Basically, you heat water to a precise temperature based on what you're cooking. So the temperature varies based on, what you're cooking. And you put it into some sort of a sealed container, whether that be a Ziploc freezer bag like I'm going to use today, or a vacuum sealed bag. And basically you just sit it in the water bath and let it cook. Now, usually sous vide cooking takes longer than other methods of cooking because it is usually done at a lower temperature. And of course, that's going to take a longer period of time to cook the food. but it gives such amazing results. And it's pretty much foolproof, because if you can set the temperature and get it into a sealed bag and into the water bath for the amount of time that the recipe states, you're golden. You're good. You're going to have good results. So you don't have to check on it or anything like that. It's perfect. One thing I will say, though, there is a misconception, and that is that you can leave it indefinitely in the water bath and it will never overcook. While it's true that the temperature of the food will never get past the temperature that you set, it does degrade over time. So the texture changes, and it varies based on what you're cooking. But like, I wouldn't be able to put this into my water bath for a week, 7 days, and expect it to come out delicious. But you can put it in for up to a day, day and a half, maybe even 2 days, depending on your temperature. And you are going to be blown away by how tender and delicious the corned beef, or really any meat that you want to sous vide. It's amazing. So if you have the Ninja Foodi pressure cooker and air crisper that has the sous vide function, or if you have the Instant Pot Duo Crisp that has the sous vide function and you haven't tried it, give it a try. If you can find a corned beef or another type of a tough cut like brisket or even a chuck roast, give sous vide a try. You will be amazed. And the process is exactly the same. You're going to fill the pot with water to a level where your meat can be submerged once it's put in the bag. You're going to set your temperature and your time, and you're going to forget about it. So it's exactly the same. What I'm using here is called an immersion circulator. So the only difference between this appliance and like the Ninja Foodi combo cookers or the Instant Pot Duo Crisp is the fact that this circulates the water around the food, which I think does a better job for even cooking and things like that. So if you really want to get into sous vide cooking, definitely invest in an immersion circulator. But if you're just dabbling in it, not sure, the Ninja Foodi works great. I have several recipes using the sous vide function on the Ninja Foodi, and really, it surprised me. It works so well. Okay, now, how do we seal the bag? So I'm using a Ziploc bag. And if you're going to do a corned beef or a large roast for the first time, and you're not exactly sure how long you want to cook it, use a Ziploc bag instead of a vacuum bag. The reason being is that you can open it. You can remove it, open it, slice off a piece, put it back in, and put it back into the water bath. And it'll be perfectly fine. With a vacuum sealed bag, you can do that if you leave like a lot of end or something, and then you like cut it off and keep sealing it down. You can do that, but I find it easier with a Ziploc freezer bag. Definitely go name brand on this. It's pretty important because you don't want to have like a less expensive bag that might leak, okay? The other thing I think is an advantage over the vacuum seal in this instance, when I like to check on something if it's a real long cook time, is because the juices, it's going to build its own juices. And sometimes resealing something that has a lot of juices in the bag can be a little difficult, and sometimes the seals don't work as well. So for this, I prefer the Ziploc bag. And then we're going to use what's called water displacement method, okay? And that simply means that we're going to place the bag into the water bath and let it force the air out. So go ahead and put your corned beef right into the bag. I don't even close it up, okay? And now I'm gonna go ahead and take this cover off. If you don't have one of these fancy it's not really fancy, it's just a plastic bin. But anyway, if you don't need this, it came with one of my sous vide circulators, but you don't need it. I would have never bought it separately, I don't think, although it is kind of handy. You can use any large container, whether it's, plastic or, metal, anything works fine for this. In fact, if you have a circulator and you have an Instant Pot, but you don't have the sous vide function, so you have one of the immersion circulators, use the inner pot. Works great. All right, so you want to make sure that your water level is full enough that whatever you're cooking is going to be fully submerged. And this is fine for this one. 10 cups is what I start out with when I'm using the Ninja Foodi. Now you just place the bag with the meat or whatever you're cooking into the water bath. Usually I do this before I start heating the water so it's not warm. Let it sink down, and when it pushes the air out, you just zip it closed. Now you don't want the open bag obviously to go under the water because you don't want it to fill with liquid. Now, let's see, we're at 138, so I'm not gonna put it in quite yet. We're not quite up to temp yet. Now, some people I've seen put in liquid into their corned beef, the bag with their corned beef that they're gonna sous vide. I don't do that. And I don't encourage you to do it either, because the corned beef over the time period that we sous vide is going to release its own juices. And I use those juices to then cook my carrots, potatoes, and cabbage in. So I don't want them diluted with the beef stock. I mean, even though it would be tasty, I just like the pure juices from the corned beef. All right, let's talk temperature. So the temperature that I use is 155 degrees. That was where I thought that it was the best, okay? Now, that's not written in stone. You could go a little bit lower. You could go down to 140 if you wanted to. It's gonna take about 2 days though for your corned beef to break down the connective tissue and to really tenderize. So if you wanna spend 2 days cooking your corned beef, you certainly can. You can drop your temperature down and it'll be fine, it'll work. You could also shorten your time by going up in temperature to about 180 degrees. But keep this in mind, the hotter the temperature that you cook at, the more moisture loss you're gonna have from the meat, okay? So it's a little give and take. At 180 degrees, you're probably gonna have good results between 16 and 20 hours. Maybe even a little bit less time than that. You know, I would start checking probably at about 12 to 14 hours if I was going to do 180. I never did test it at 180 because that just was too hot for me. I just didn't want to lose that much of the juices. So I didn't go with 180. Also, 180 is going to give you a slightly different texture. So let's say you went 180 for 20 hours. You're going to end up with a little bit more flakier texture to your corned beef. So more pull apart, kind of shreddable. Whereas at 155, it is steak-like the entire time. It never becomes like, falling apart. It is sliceable, it is tender, it is juicy, and it is delicious. But that's just how I like it. If you want it to be more fall apart, shreddable, then absolutely do 180 Fahrenheit for about 14 hours, 12 to 14 hours. Start testing it then. Take it out, slice a little bit off, see if it's the texture you like. If not, reseal the bag using the water displacement method, and then cook it a little bit longer. So, you can definitely do that. But for this recipe, we're gonna do 155, and I'm gonna go for 36 hours. And I got a little funny story about that. So let's see, we are just about there. We are just about heated. I'm gonna plop this in, and then I'm gonna tell you that story. All right, there we go, 155. So let me go ahead and remove this cover. And again, if you don't have one of these types of things, and you're not using the Instant Pot or the Ninja Foodie for the sous vide, which you use the lid for, the pressure lid you use, then just use foil or something on top. But you do want it to be covered so you have less heat loss, okay? All right, so let's go ahead and put this in. We have reached the 155. You want to make sure that your meat is submerged down. And this one comes with like a little rack here. It's not really necessary. It's not going to float up or anything. I guess you could use it to kind of weight down the bags, but you'd have to really fill this up quite a bit. All right, I'll just leave it on though. It's fine. And then put the cover back on. And now we do absolutely nothing, and I'm comfortable going the complete 36 hours because I've already done the testing and I've already taken it out and tried it at different times. You definitely absolutely want to go a minimum of 10 hours, okay? Before that, it's not even really sliceable, or it's not going to be delicious. At 10 hours, it was just a little bit, it was too tough, really. When I say a little bit too tough, it was too tough. At about 16 hours or so, it was passable. Like, I mean, it was good. It was delicious. But probably more for shaving on a meat slicer for, like deli thin corned beef or making a Reuben. That would have been a good timing. Then I went into the 20 and the 24-hour mark, and this is where the funny story comes in. 24 hours, I was like, this is it. This is amazing. It was so tender. It was sliceable. It was, I could just pull it apart a little bit so I could see, like the fibers of the meat kind of pulling apart a little bit. It was just so, so delicious. So I told my friend Dixie, who loves to sous vide cook, I said, corned beef, 24 hours at 155, that is the ticket. And she said to me, go 36. And I'm like, it's perfect at 24. Why would I go 36? And I was like, well, all right. I mean, I've eaten corned beef all day, right? Because I started at 10 hours and now we're up to, 24 hours. So I have been eating corned beef all day long, testing this recipe. And it was nighttime. It was now like 8 o'clock at night. And I was like, all right, I'll just leave it in overnight and check it in the morning. I'll eat corned beef again tomorrow. So I did. I left it 36 hours. And I really wanted to tell Dixie that it was overdone. It was a little dry. I'm going to stick with my 24 hours. But, after Jeff and I tasted it for dinner, so I took it out, I refrigerated it, then I air fried it, and then we had it for dinner. Dixie was right. It was amazing at 36. But anywhere between 24 hours and 36 will be delicious if you like it to be sliceable, tender, and steak-like. But if you have the time, go the 36 hours. All right, so it's been 36 hours, and now it is time to check on our corned beef. One thing I will say is about 2 hours into the sous vide process, my husband said, hey, I thought you said it wouldn't float. Sure enough, it was floating up. So I put a plate on there to hold it down. So that's why that's in there. And you sometimes have to do that with different things that you're sous vide cooking. Now, I've never had to do it with corned beef before because it's heavier, but this one just must have been a little bit more buoyant. The water is hot, so use tongs or something like that to remove the plate and the bag. All right, there we go. Now you can see all the juices that are in there. We can go ahead and turn this off. Now you want to keep those, especially if you're going to be making cabbage and potatoes and things like that, because this will be your cooking liquid. All right, so let me just go ahead and set this down here and open the bag up. I also did a test of the temperature just because I like to double check my appliances to make sure they're functioning correctly. And the immersion circulator was 155 degrees, or the water, I should say, was 155 degrees. So the immersion circulator keeps it spot on the entire time, which isn't always the case with multi-use machines like the Instant Pot Duo Crisp or the Ninja Foodie. Sometimes they're off by a little bit, but not enough usually to make any kind of a difference. All right, now it doesn't look very pretty, but don't worry about that because I am going to fix that up when I go to make my corned beef and cabbage dinner, which I'm gonna show you in the next video, how to take your sous vide corned beef, whether it's warm or cold from the refrigerator, and get it done in just minutes using your pressure cooker and air crisper. All right, so let's go ahead and slice this though. Look at that. Look at how beautiful that is. Oh my gosh. Wow, that's gorgeous. All right. Now, I usually crisp up the fat part, but since I'm not going to do that for the tasting, I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off. And this looks amazing. Look at that. It's tender. just breaks apart, but it's still, holding together. It's not shredding. It is perfect. Oh my gosh, that is so amazing. Wow. Now, the difference in texture between 24 hours and 36 hours is very minimal, but it is a little bit softer of a texture. So anywhere between 24 and 36 hours is perfectly fine for your sous vide corned beef. All right, join me in the next video where I'm going to show you how to turn this into corned beef, cabbage, potatoes, and carrots for a complete corned beef and cabbage meal.